Okay, good evening. This is the Transportation and Circulation Committee meeting for February 24th, 2022. Let's do the roll call.
Kathleen Rodriguez.
Present.
Andres Malava.
Present.
Eve Sanford. Susan Horn. Hillary Blackerby.
Here.
Ian Bakke.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we have any changes to the agenda? I know it's not listed there, just asking.
Chair Rodriguez, we do not have any changes to tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Then would you like to go ahead to public comment?
So Ms. Mason, can you check to see if we have any hands raised? It's on any matters not related to tonight's agenda, if someone would wishes to speak.
At this time, there are no hands raised.
Okay.
All right, then I think we can move on to, do you have any announcements?
Yes, Chair Rodriguez.
Jessica, yeah.
Yes, I have two announcements. Good evening, everyone. Jessica Grant, the interim Public Works Downtown Manager. So the two announcements that I have, the first one is committee member David Cohn has stepped down from the Transportation Circulation Committee due to a relocation from Santa Barbara. We did want to take this time to honor his service on the committee and wish him well with his future endeavors. And then the second announcement I have is there is going to be a ribbon cutting next Thursday, March 3rd, for the Las Positas Modoc multi-use path and the Arroyo Burro open space. It's a combined ribbon cutting. Very excited. You've been along the way. Several of the committee members of watching this project from concept all the way through construction. So we're very excited to celebrate and hope that you can join us. And there was besides invitations, I believe that went out to you today, there's a press release for it, and that also went out today, and I believe it will be in City News and Brief, inviting the public as well. So very excited about those two projects. And that is all I had for announcements.
Do you have any update? You can probably tell us at the next meeting about when our next recruitment for members is going to happen.
Oh, thank you for that. So the next recruitment window is happening this June.
So does that mean as of June 1st, people could submit their names, or how does that work?
I believe it begins the application phase in June, but I will make sure I share any relevant links for those applications. So you can pass it to any colleagues that you might know that might be interested for this wonderful committee.
Yeah, that would be super. Okay, can we look at the approving the minutes from the last regular meeting for those who were there?
I'd move approval for the October 2021 minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Chair Rodriguez, I believe Liz will need to take a roll call for each item.
Perfect.
Because in the virtual format.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, Jessica. All in favor?
Or Liz, go ahead and do a roll call vote. Name
Okay.
each member's name.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. Ian Bakke,
Aye.
Hillary Blackerby,
Aye.
Kathleen Rodriguez,
Aye.
Andres Malavas.
Aye.
Thank you.
Chair Rodriguez, with the motion passing, we can now move on to the next section of the agenda for the reports.
Yes, great. Great. Looking forward to this report on Anacapa Street first.
Yeah, so let me introduce, we have tonight Bedad Garigosley. He's the supervising traffic engineer that is going to provide the presentation on the 400 block of Anacapa Street conversion to two-way traffic. This is an item that does require an action. And with that, we'll have Bedad, why don't you take it away?
Sure, thank you, Jessica. So good evening, Chair and committee members. Tonight I'll be presenting the city's proposal to convert the 400 block of Anacapa Street from a one-way street to a two-way street. Next slide, please. Tonight's staff recommendation is that the Transportation and Circulation Committee receive a report on converting the 400 block of Anacapa Street to a two-way street and recommend to City Council that the 400 block of Anacapa be converted to a two-way street. Next slide, please. So before we move on to any of the details, I'd like to take a minute to orient everyone to the area of discussion. So as shown in this slide, the 400 block of Anacapa Street is located between Haley Street, which is one way to the east, and Gutierrez Street, which is one way to the west. Also shown on this slide is that the neighboring 400 blocks of State Street and Santa Barbara Street, both being two-way streets. Next slide, please. So why is this being proposed, and also why now? So as part of the city's pavement maintenance program, the 400 block of Anacapa Street is scheduled to be repaved this summer. And this presents traffic engineering staff with an opportunity to evaluate the existing roadway conditions in the area and present any recommendations to improve circulation and address any identified collision patterns. So in this case, converting the 400 block of Anacapa Street from a one-way street to a two-way street would improve traffic circulation for the 300 and 400 blocks of Anacapa, as well as the 100 East block of Gutierrez. It would decrease the number of conflicts between turning vehicles and pedestrians at the State and Gutierrez and State and Haley intersections. And it would provide an alternate route when there's a special event or incident restricting traffic flow at the State and Gutierrez intersection. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about each one of these in the next slides. So this slide, this photo shown illustrates the existing traffic circulation option for vehicles on the 300 and 400 blocks of Anacapa and the 100 block of East Gutierrez. So as you can see on the slide, any trips originating from these blocks who intend to travel east or north or even south on the 101, first they have to travel west on Gutierrez Street. They have to turn right, go up State Street. They have to then turn right on Haley, and then they can proceed east. So it takes about 3 blocks to be able to start traveling east if you are starting in one of those 3 blocks. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how traffic from these blocks could circulate with the proposed two-way circulation. So by converting this block to a two-way street, drivers would be able to bypass State Street and travel directly north to Haley via the 400 block of Anacapa. On average, this more efficient route would save approximately 1 to 2 minutes in travel time for motorists, and it'll also result in a reduction of approximately 115 vehicle miles traveled each day. I also do want to note that because the 400 block of Santa Barbara Street just to the east is already a two-way street and provides access to the north and into the city, northbound traffic on the 400 block of Anacapa Street is expected to be limited to trips originating in those three blocks that I mentioned. So the 300 block and 400 block of Anacapa Street and the 100 East block of Gutierrez. So we wouldn't expect someone to say come up Garden Street, turn left onto Gutierrez, go up Anacapa, and then turn right on Haley. And next slide, please. So moving on to the safety benefits of the proposed two-way alternative. In this case, State Street has been identified as an area with a pattern of both pedestrian and bicycle involved collisions, particularly on the 300 and 400 blocks of State Street. So by reducing the vehicular demand on State Street, there would be less conflicts between vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists in the area. In particular, the State and Gutierrez and State and Haley intersections each have thousands of pedestrian crossings each day, which can cause delays and conflicts with drivers that are turning right or even left, for that matter. So by providing the alternate route along the proposed two-way 400 block of Anacapa Street, drivers intending to travel east would not be forced through these two intersections, resulting in less friction between roadway users. So slide on this page, or the photos on this slide, on the left shows a vehicle turning right at an intersection needing to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. So by reducing the number of right turns at the intersection, just reduce those number of conflicts with pedestrians. And then on the right, you see the example of a right hook collision where a driver intending to turn right overlaps with the path of travel of a bicyclist trying to go straight. So both of these conditions would be reduced at those two intersections. Next slide, please. So what are the trade-offs for a two-way Anacapa? So the primary trade-off would be additional northbound traffic on the 400 block of Anacapa Street. And to quantify about how much traffic would be added to this block, city staff collected traffic counts at the nearby intersections and observed existing travel patterns. Based on that information, it's projected that there would be approximately 600 additional daily northbound trips on the 400 block of Anacapa Street, 60 of which would occur during the PM peak period. So between that 4:30 and 5:30 PM time is when we'd expect the most amount of traffic on that block. So while that number may seem high.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Or maybe you're about to say it, but how many are there currently, I guess?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We have about 3,800 cars a day that use that section of Anacapa. So it's about a 15% increase in traffic on that block. But I do want to mention, as shown on the slide, 600 cars might seem like a lot, but when you spread that out throughout the entire day, it would translate to only about 1 additional car per minute during that PM peak. And then throughout the rest of the day, you'd expect to see an additional northbound car every 2 minutes on average. So I do want to mention that 600 number, I know it may seem high, but throughout the day, it's not as bad as it sounds. Next slide, please. So the city held an online public outreach meeting on February 9th to introduce the proposed change to the residents and businesses in the area. And the following are key takeaways from that meeting. So firstly, the feedback was generally split for those in favor of the improved traffic circulation and those opposed to the additional traffic on the 400 block of Anacapa. And the second key takeaway that I got from that meeting was people were concerned about how the two-way Anacapa Street would safely terminate at Haley. So drivers traveling northbound on Anacapa would have to turn right on Haley Street. And I'll go over that in a couple slides, but if you can go to the next slide, please. As shown in this slide, there would be plenty of notification of the right turn only condition at Haley Street, including one-way signs, do not enter, wrong way signs, and right turn only markings. These would all be consistent with the California MUTCD and consistent with other locations around town that are similar. While we're on this slide too, I do want to take a minute to talk about a question that was brought up in the public outreach meetings. People were asking, is this going to result in parking removal on the block? And at the time, I said that they wouldn't, but taking a closer look, and if you see this in this photo, the car closest to the intersection, that one right there, that parking spot would likely need to be removed to provide adequate sight lines at the intersection, and also just space to maneuver to make that right turn. So there would need to be that one parking spot removed. But I do also want to mention that we did recently identify 4 to 5 parking spots on the lower part of Anacapa, just of the 400 block, just north of Gutierrez, which we recently converted from red curb to a mix of gray and yellow. So that one parking spot could be offset by those 4 to 5 spots that we recently changed. Next slide, please. So converting a street from a one-way street to a two-way street requires approval by City Council. So the next steps with the committee's recommendation would be to take this item to the Ordinance Committee in the spring, City Council following, and then we'd expect construction to start in summer, not summary, summer or fall of 2022. Next slide. That's actually the end of the presentation, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm at a handicap. I can't see anybody else except the person talking. So Jessica, would you solicit questions? Or...
Yes, at this time, I do not see any committee members with questions.
Do we have any public comment requests?
It does look like we had a hand raised, and I believe her name is Julie Bishkoff. I'm going to unmute you for comment, and we have 2 minutes for during this comment period, and I will switch my slides to denote that time frame. So Julie, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Julie Bischoff, and thank you for having this meeting. My question really is about parking on Anacapa, when I believe the low-income housing units will be built where currently Staples parking lot and Staples is. So that driveway, I have been told, will be on Anacapa Street. So the 600 vehicles per day would probably increase quite a bit. And I don't know how many parking spaces are going to be provided for that unit. I think it's 52 parking spaces and more units. So I am concerned about that for the excess traffic. I'm concerned about Reed's Appliance Store getting their deliveries in and out where they will park. And if there aren't enough parking spots for the new housing coming in, where will they park? Sounds to me like there won't be enough parking in the blocks where things are. So I would like to know if anyone has answers to that, and thank you.
Do we have any other public? I can see now something happened to my screen. It's wonderful. Do we have any more public comment? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bishop.
Madam Chair, at this time, there are no raised hands.
All right. Do we have any committee comments before we move on to make our recommendation?
Well, I had a question. I mean, I'm just curious, I'm curious about the answers to those questions that were just brought up in the public comment.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So when I did evaluate the amount of traffic on the street, I do think that the 600 number is pretty conservative. It's likely less, but the question is still good with that development on the lower part of Anacapa. In terms of the amount of traffic that it would generate and where it would come from, I do think a two-way section of Anacapa would at least be able to split the trip distribution up. So if Anacapa were to remain one-way southbound, all of the traffic for that housing development would all need to come from the Haley intersection down the entire block. By having a two-way street, you'd be able to split that up a little bit better. So you probably expect to see about like half of the cars coming on the south through Gutierrez and turning right and going up Anacapa and then making a quick left turn into their driveway. So it would be able to bypass a lot more of the block in terms of how much traffic would be on that street. I don't have a good answer for the number of parking spaces for that development. I do know that the driveway that they're proposing is on Anacapa. So the existing driveway that's on Gutierrez Street would be removed. That's just west of Anacapa. So that would free up maybe 3 more parking spaces on Gutierrez, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for the total number of units or how many parking spaces would be provided for that.
But Dodd, I could add just in general for any new land development project that goes through the standard land development process. Again, I don't have all the specifics for that particular development, and there are, yes, parking requirements, but depending upon type, sometimes there's not necessarily a residential parking requirement, but there would be commercial parking. Again, it just depends if they're in parking zones of benefit, etc. But it is, when development is reviewed in the process, it's not to put any undue burden onto the on-street parking.
Would, if there are no further comments, thank you, Bedad. The presentation was very thorough. The paperwork ahead of time was excellent. The documentation that we received. So would someone like to make a recommendation? We don't have to add the part about the received a report. We could just say that we recommend to the city council, so forth.
If I may have one question.
Yeah.
So thank you for the summary. One question on line of sight from Gutierrez and Anacapa there. The way it is now, the one turn, sometimes rate of vehicle traffic's somewhat quick, and it is a little bit limited in line of sight. I was curious if that came up at all in the community outreach, or if there was any concern or plan or thought around line of sight on that intersection.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We did recently extend the red curb on the northeast side of the intersection. So if you're coming southbound on Anacapa looking to the left, we did just extend that about 25 feet. So the visibility should have improved pretty significantly for that turn. We also did the same thing northbound. We have a lot of on the 300 block coming from like the REI shopping center. that making that left turn before was challenging when there was vehicles parked right up to the near the intersection. So both of those have been improved pretty significantly in the past. I think it was a month ago we installed the red curb, but it's something we keep an eye out for all the time for if any collision patterns come up, to come up with a way to mitigate that. And like you said, line of sight it's really important for uncontrolled intersections.
Thank you for that.
Chair, I noticed that a hand had sort of gone up and down and up and down. Someone named Dean. I don't know if we've like officially closed public comment, but I wouldn't mind hearing from another member of the public just since we're here. Is that all right, Jessica?
Yeah, so Liz, can you confirm if there's a hand raised?
Yes, thank you. There is one hand raised at this time, Dean Vanasek, I believe. So Dean, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you may go ahead and speak.
Hello, I'm Dean Vanacek. I own a home at 420 Anacapa, and I have a concern about the extra traffic that's coming down with this proposed change. We've owned the house since 1949, belonged to my family many, many years. And I know, looking at the different streets between Gutierrez and Haley Street, Gutierrez is both ways, Santa Barbara is both ways, State Street's both ways, and Chapala is both ways. Anacapa is not. And one of the main reasons is there's 7 residential homes on that street. Many of them were built in the 1920s, where they don't have a driveway to actually drive in and turn around. You have to back out. Some driveways do not even go back to a rear yard because the lots are very narrow. You know, there are children on the block, single family. We don't want the extra traffic coming down our neighborhood. Leave Anacapa Street alone. Leave it like it is. Save our parking space and save our neighborhood, because we do not want extra traffic coming down our street for that reason. 600 more cars? Are you kidding? Come on. I mean, you have the other streets if they want to go back and forth, but those don't have residential single family homes like Anacapa does on that block. Please take a look at it yourself. That's a big concern of ours. So my recommendation is just scratch it and not have a 2-way street on Anacapa. Leave it like it is, one direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanacek. We really appreciate your comments, sincerely.
Chair, I had a sort of comment.
Yes, please.
So one question is, has this block always and forever been 1-way? Or was it ever 2-way? Or does the institutional memory go back that far on this?
Yeah, really?
My memory goes back about 10, 15 years for city of Santa Barbara items. So from what I recall, it's been 1-way. But it is interesting that it's the only 1-way block along those 400 block sections. So like State Street, Chapala, Bath, De La Vina, Santa Barbara, all of these are 2-way streets, except for that 400 block of Anacapa.
Yeah, and you know, I understand the comment that was just made. I'm very familiar with this area. I bike through there or drive through there multiple times a week, so I'm very familiar with it. And I work nearby. The 400 block of Garden, right, is 2-way. Obviously, there's a significant amount of traffic on that street, that because there's a freeway on off there, makes sense, and that's a real kind of, it's not technically an arterial, but it's a major street with a lot of and there's residential on that street, where people have to back out and things like that. So to me, I mean, one, understanding the flow, like the reasons, the way I see it, this isn't just a solution in search of a problem, right? Like there are actually flow reasons to do this. We're not just like trying to, you know, bother the people on the 400 block of Anacapa. I think it's a good point about the new development that this would actually divert more, split more off. People would turn right, and maybe it makes sense to even have that be, you could only turn right out of the driveway of that new development. Obviously, that's up to land development to put any kind of conditions on that, but that's something that would be interesting, so that they're not, you know, on other portions of the block. There are definitely people who, you know, go all the way around that are on that street sort of either needlessly or on an additional block. And so I am conscious of not making people drive around more, not having more emissions, not having more vehicle miles traveled just because. I love a one-way street and I love the rest of Anacapa, but it's also a very, very different condition on that block once you're basically almost to a dead end. So I hear what the public's saying. I think this is reasonable. As we say in, you know, traffic terms, it's just paint. And so obviously, you know, safety is the number one thing. And I know that the city would certainly not intend to put something out that was not safe and handled properly. And if there is some unforeseen thing and it you know, causes problems of any significance, obviously it's something that can be revisited in the future. But I think that it will be okay. And also people will be able to still get out of their driveways and you know, still get through despite the change. So I'd be happy to make the motion to recommend to council that this block of the 400 block of Anacapa Street be converted to a two-way street.
We need a second.
I would also second it. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make a comment at this time before we have the vote, and that is, as a heavy user of Gutierrez Street, that corner of State and Haley, which was just mentioned, is significant because there are incidents with pedestrians and cars because you're having so much going on where you're turning right on Haley and State is coming down and you're just about to start the pedestrian area. It is a troublesome corner. And I think I certainly respect the residents' perspective. And I think that that the city will keep an eye on the area. And if there are incidents, they always monitor pedestrian and vehicular incidents, and they will be tracked. And the residents certainly have an opportunity to stay in touch with the transportation department if the situation is untenable once the changes are made. So are there any other comments by the committee?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote. Committee Member Bakke.
Aye.
Committee Member Blackerby.
Aye.
Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Malavas.
Aye.
Committee Member Horn. Oh, sorry, she's absent.
Right.
Thank you.
Chair Rodriguez, with the motion passing, we can now proceed to the next item.
Terrific.
All right, so this is the second report for this evening. Miss Chelsea Swanson, our acting supervising transportation planner, will be giving the report tonight. And it is about the Lower East Side Community Connectivity Active Transportation Planning Effort. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yes, with that, go ahead and provide the presentation, Ms. Swanson.
Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, Chair and committee members. I'm Chelsea Swanson, the Acting Supervising Transportation Planner in the Public Works Department. And tonight I'll be discussing the Lower East Side Community Connectivity Active Transportation Plan, and we'll provide a brief update about where we are in the planning process. Next slide, please. So as I'm sure you all know, the city adopted a pedestrian master plan in 2006, which is intended to enhance the city's walkability, increase connections to destinations throughout the city, and promote walking as a viable means of transportation. The city also adopted a Vision Zero strategy in 2018 to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. So these plans and policies are the basis for the grant funding that was received to analyze ways to improve both walking and biking between the East Side neighborhood and the waterfront area. And as you'll see on the image to the left of the slide, this is taken from the pedestrian master plan, and it does identify a potential future overcrossing location between the East Side neighborhood and over to Dwight Murphy Field. And the starting point in the East Side neighborhood is at the intersection of Pitos and South Canada Streets. Next slide, please, Jessica. So this slide shows the plan area, which is primarily the East Side neighborhood and several destinations south of the highway, such as Dwight Murphy Field, the zoo, the Cabrillo Ball Field, restaurants, beaches, and the waterfront. The potential overcrossing location, as identified in the pedestrian master plan, is circled in dark blue. This graphic also demonstrates the approximate 1.25 mile gap between highway crossing locations for this neighborhood, being Milpas and Cacique on the west, and the Cabrillo Boulevard crossing on the east. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives an outline of where we are in the planning process to date. The city applied for a Cycle 4 Active Transportation Program, or ATP grant, in 2018. And grant funding was received in the amount of $344,000 for the plan in May of 2020. The kickoff of the project was delayed a bit due to pandemic-related conditions and restrictions for in-person public outreach efforts, and also just a shift in workload duties related to pandemic conditions, such as the closure of State Street. So a one-year time extension was granted last March to give us a deadline of May of this year to hire a consultant for a feasibility study. And in fall of 2021, we went out to the public to kick off our outreach and public meetings. Next slide, please, Jessica. So the first public meeting was a webinar format. We've been trying to do both webinar and in-person as conditions allow. And this was held on October 25th, 2021. We had a Spanish interpretation as well at this meeting. This screenshot of the slide shows sort of the overview of what we went over at the meeting. We shared the policies and plans that are basis for the grant funding that was received. We also shared about all the recently completed projects and the upcoming projects in the plan area to give a bigger picture of the connectivity. And we also polled the attendees throughout the presentation with 8 questions. The questions were aimed at getting a better understanding of what modes of transportation they use between the East Side and Waterfront, what their destinations are, what routes work well or not so well for biking and walking, and also whether they supported the city to further study an overcrossing at the location that's identified in the pedestrian master plan. We also held an interactive question and answer session at the end of the webinar where they could verbally speak or write their comments and questions. Next slide, please. Then we held an in-person meeting and it was an open house format at the Franklin Center on October 30th. There were several interactive stations where community members could answer questions and add comments on display boards and discuss issues with staff. And the questions followed the same format as the questions we had in the webinar, trying to get at the same types of answers. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows 2 of the display boards with notes and input from community members. And in addition to these 2 public meetings, we did launch an online public survey for which we received about 86 responses. Next slide, please, Jessica. So based on the input received at the public meetings and through the survey responses, we did see some themes. There was strong support in general for moving forward with studying the overcrossing location that is identified in the pedestrian master plan. There were some concerns just raised about how the city will be able to maintain the new infrastructure, though, with regard to safety and nuisance activity, that type of thing. There was some interest in or questions about, why we didn't look at other locations like from Voluntario Street or Aliso Street. And that primarily has to do with the amount of real estate available. The location that we're looking at has the most room to work with. We also did hear some interest or questions about whether an undercrossing was a possibility, and learned that some people in the neighborhood do use the Sycamore Creek undercrossing currently. We did hear that Cacique is largely the preferred walking and biking route currently. However, homeless activity was a concern of many, and for cyclists in particular, some were not comfortable with biking through this area. Next slide, please, Jessica. And then again, some more themes. People are not comfortable crossing freeway ramps, roundabouts, and some at the railroad crossings were uncomfortable. Some of the concerns for walking in general at the highway crossings or in areas leading to them included lack of lighting, missing sidewalk. Cabrillo Boulevard was one of the areas where it goes under the freeway and the railroad there, where there is no sidewalk. Driver speeding or not yielding, and homeless activity. And some of the concerns raised for biking at existing crossings or near them also included lack of lighting, lack of bike lanes. Some are uncomfortable sharing the road with vehicles, and a lack of bike parking at destinations. Next slide, please. So after the public outreach, as we've received strong support from the community to study the feasibility of an overcrossing in that location that is identified in the pedestrian master plan, our next step is to hire a consultant to conduct preliminary engineering and environmental studies and to develop conceptual overcrossing designs and cost estimates for this planning document. As you can see in this graphic, this is just one example of a challenge. A potential crossing location is in and adjacent to the floodplain. and also other sensitive resources associated with Sycamore Creek. So this study will look at hydrological, biological, and structural issues, also right-of-way constraints related to where Caltrans right-of-way and the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way.
Chelsea, can I ask a question at this point? I
Sure.
think it's relevant. When I read the report and then with what you were just saying, are you literally talking about people walking through Sycamore Creek to get on? I didn't think there was any real undercrossing there. Can you explain that?
Sure. Jessica might know the actual design of the channel better than I think it's maybe because I haven't been under there myself. But yes, we did hear a few members in the community use that to get across the freeway and have been for many years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was surprising. I wouldn't say it was a lot of people, but it was some. Jessica, did you have anything to add to that?
Just to add, yeah, it was, I think we were surprised of the amount of local residents using that as an undercrossing. It was recently, that channel was widened probably about 10 years ago. I'm off a little bit on my timeline. And then the bridge on Punta Gorda was also replaced as a flood control project, because that is an area, as you see on the flood map area in blue, this is a common area of flooding. But with all of the drought that has occurred also over the past decade, it's pretty, where, you know, our creeks are drier than normal, and then that's probably providing some comfort for those to go under the creek. But again, not as ideal, and that was an area that went under significant restoration as well.
Creeks are not designed as pedestrian walkways, so they're not safe. So that's what hit me.
And we heard that sentiment as well from a few neighbors, that, you know, they think it should be closed off because they had concerns for people's safety
Sure.
going under there. So
thank you. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So since we also heard about specific current concerns relating to some of the existing and biking and walking routes during the public outreach process, we will also continue to look for opportunities to make safety enhancements in the planned area, in addition to this planning effort. Next slide, please, Jessica. So as I mentioned, we will be requesting up to 3 design options in this feasibility study to be looked at. And we anticipate it to look somewhat like this is the overcrossing from Ortega Street with you'll note the longer landing area so that they can meet ADA requirements. But this is the type of crossing we anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, thank you. So the study should be completed by late summer, and we plan to then return, excuse me, to the public with findings of the study and to share the conceptual design options. And we also plan to return to the TCC and also the Architectural Board of Review to share the design options and receive feedback. We'll then complete a draft plan consistent with the grant requirements, and we would return to the TCC with the draft plan likely in early 2023. And then the final plan is anticipated to be adopted by council probably fall of 2023. Lastly, once the plan is finalized, we will seek future grant funding opportunities for implementation of the plan. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you, and please let us know if you have questions or comments.
Any committee questions at this point? Anybody? I just have one. How many, maybe you don't know this off the top of your head, but how many more overcrossings are like that are planned along 101? I'd love to see one up at La Cumbre Plaza, between Hidden Valley and La Cumbre Plaza.
I'm not aware of any others that are currently being studied, but Jessica, you might have.
Chair Rodriguez,
Input
great
on that.
question. That was one in that general vicinity that was flagged in the larger regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy for longer term potential projects. I know that there's been discussions of what the fate is for the La Cumbre Plaza area and maybe future development associated with that. But maybe at that time it is revisited. It's not in the immediate capital forecast, but definitely in the long-term forecast.
That's terrific, because with that multi-million-dollar bike path, we're really poised to make it really convenient for people to go between Hidden Valley and the shopping area. Even if La Cumbre Plaza changes to housing, there's a lot of marketing and markets and other stores over there. It would be great to, I think it would be a great way to reduce vehicular traffic.
And Chair Rodriguez, there's another planning effort also that Ms. Swanson's looking at is the Castillo undercrossing for safety improvements. We have a planning grant to investigate that as well. Longer term, it might be that we're looking at an overcrossing in that vicinity as well, but those are, again, not in the immediate short-term capital.
Yeah, that's another good one too. If there are no more committee questions, we could go to public comment.
I would just chime in here if I can, Chair, for a second.
Please.
I think that this is a really exciting project. I think just generally speaking, whenever we can do this and people are walking from point A to point B, even through these conditions for a reason, right? Whenever we can make it safer and more convenient for them, we should do that. Also living in Hidden Valley, I completely echo all of your sentiments about kind of the immediate need for one there as well. Something to consider. Obviously not right now, but I think that need exists and I would use it. So yeah, but very excited to see this as well.
Well, thank you. Any public comment pending?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, there are no raised hands.
Yeah. Well, since this is not something that is being brought to us as a recommendation yet, and we will be seeing it again in the fall and look forward to that. If there are no further comments, I think we could go on to program updates. Does anybody?
Yeah, I wanted to add a comment.
Yeah.
I could. So it was very exciting, and it's just I had the adventure of riding my bike in this roundabout this past weekend, and it's not the first time I've done it, but it might be the last.
Yeah.
And it's always not awesome. So obviously, very needed. It's stunning, right? Like how many folks and families and little kids don't live on the east side. As the crow flies, they're extremely close to the coast and they do not go because it's not safe for them to go on their own, and their families, don't necessarily want to hassle with what it takes to get there either. So this would just be really transformative. The other thing about really freeway overcrossings anywhere, the direction that Caltrans is going over the past few years and very seriously in the past year is to really undo and try to mitigate the harms that they're acknowledging that the freeway system, the highways have done to the whole state over the past, 50, 60 years. And so they really are making a conscious effort on how they're funding things and how they're planning things that I've seen to sort of undo some of the harm. It's going to take my whole life you know, to see all of that come to fruition. But I think this is something that we're in a good position to do this planning now, to have it queued up, to have funding, whether it's ATP or something else in the future, to have it funded, to have that specific nexus of, you know, knitting the community back together that's split by the freeway. So I think this is, you know, I think we're going to see more of these. I think we need to. It's unfortunate that they're remarkably so much more expensive than, you know, just not having to go up into the air. But it's, you know, it's kind of our only option at this point, especially when you are in a floodplain. And I mean, obviously that's one of the things about being on the coast and near an old lagoon and near a watershed. There's you kind of got to go up instead of under. So I'm really excited about this, looking forward to the planning effort and looking forward to seeing designs and everything. So just want to thank staff for, you know, working on this. It's really, really exciting.
Absolutely. So we're enthusiastic about this project, and I think we're ready to go on to program updates.
Great. Thank you, Chair Rodriguez and committee members. Before I go into program updates, I forgot to mention two other items. One, joining us on the call tonight is our Planning Commission liaison, Roxana Bonderson. So Ms. Bonderson has always been great at attending all of the TCC meetings, and thank you again for joining the committee tonight. It's much appreciated. And then Cliff Maurer, who is our new Public Works Director too, is on the at the hearing as well virtually. So, and the other item is next meeting that we'll have in a couple of months. We will be having the election of this year's chair and vice chair. So just something to be prepared for at the next meeting. So with that, I'm going to go into just a brief updates on our various programs. And the first one is the city's bike share pilot program. We will be going to City Council next Tuesday, that is March 1st, with an annual update of the pilot program. So we are in year one. I can't believe it's already been a year of this program, and it's year 1 of 3. So again, that's just an update at City Council, very similar presentation that you all received this past October. So it would be great if some of the committee members were able to, again, just join in and to listen in on the City Council discussion or participate in public comment if you so choose. As far as
say that date again,
March 1st,
okay.
It's next Tuesday. City Council meetings begin at 2 p.m. and I believe it will be, I don't know exactly of the timing, but I know one of the items following this, is a time certain at 4 p.m. So sometime between 2 and 4 p.m. This item will be heard. Is just to give you a preview on where we landed on the year as far as statistics go for this program. Right now we have 140 pedal assist electric bikes in circulation right now, with about 50 docking stations. We've had 15,000 riders, 81,000 trips, and over 320,000 miles ridden. So that is quite impressive for 140 bikes that we're not even at. The projection is to get to 250 pedal assist electric bikes in circulation. So quite impressive with that amount of mileage that has ridden so far. And we're at about 68% of members writing it for membership writers. As mentioned last October, we're still experiencing the delays of the microchips because of the pandemic. That seems to be everything for the pandemic and items. There's lots of things on delay. So this happens to be one of them. And so that is the current issue that we're having additional dock locations at this point in time. But good news is we are anticipating 65 docks coming in March, and then 85 in early April. So I'll believe it when I see it, but we definitely have a lot of locations already started to have those come in at. So hopefully when we have our next meeting, I have good news to report. And I think that's it for bike share. Again, we'll be going over the details again at council on Tuesday. The second item is Measure A, Cycle 5. We, again, at the last October meeting, we discussed that there was 5 applications the city would like to submit, and we did. It was for 2 bicycle and pedestrian applications, which is the Modoc Road Multi-Use Path Extension Project, and then the West Side to Lower West Bike Route Completion Project. So those applications were submitted February 1st. And then we had 3 Safe Routes to School applications that were also submitted on February 1st. And that's the Santa Barbara Junior High Multi-Use Path Gap Closure on Coda Street, San Andreas Safe Crossings and Lighting Project, and Monta Vista Safe Crossings and Lighting Project. Those applications, again, are currently in review, and a scoring committee will convene in early April. We should know preliminary results in early May, and then the SBCAG board would vote for approval on the which applications to be funded on their agenda that's scheduled for May 19th. And that is it right now, but again, it's a very competitive process with a lot of great projects, I assume, were submitted by our other sister cities. And so let's move on to the last item, is the Active Transportation Program, Cycle 5 Augmentation and Cycle 6. So again, I had a little report out last time where we were at on the potential funding for an augmentation for Cycle 5. There's approximately 500 million that could go back into Cycle 5 for applications. And that was one, I think, when we last spoke, that didn't make it into the final budget. And then there was a revised budget in January by the governor, and that line item is back in again, but it still needs to go through the legislature. So bottom line is there's still some potential hope. There are 2 projects of ours that we submitted that scored very high, just missed the cutoff on Cliff Drive, and then the West Side and Lower West Active Transportation Plan Implementation Project, again, which is a lot of various active transportation improvements. So again, we're keeping our fingers crossed. If something comes to fruition, it would be great. And again, we will not know until this probably June, July, the status of that. So in the meantime, we are working on Cycle 6 applications. There will be an official call out next month, where Cycle 6 will go live, and then with the applications due June 15th of 2022. We are planning for the applications that we weren't successful with in the Cycle 5 to reapply. So that's the Cliff Drive, the multi-use path, and safe crossings along the entire corridor of Cliff Drive. Again, the west side and lower west implementation planning effort, which is again a lot of active transportation improvements through the area. And then we're also planning to rescope the project that we didn't score that high on Milpas to focus on safety of intersections. So for the past couple months, we reinitiated all the community engagement and just finished 6 community workshops in about the past 4 weeks. 3 of them being virtual workshops and 3 of them in person for those projects. So in general, we continue to receive community support. We'll be at council at some point during the context of the budget discussions about if there's any potential for match monies for these grants to make them more competitive for Cycle 6. So with that, if there's any questions, and I believe after questions, then we go to if there's anybody from the public wishing to speak on any of these program updates.
Sure. Well, that's an awesome list of activities that plates that you have spinning in the air, hoping to find money. I would like to make one comment. The Little Mesa newspaper that comes out had a very, very nice article about potential improvements on Cliff Drive. So I think that neighborhood is really hoping and looking forward. I lived in that neighborhood since starting in 1973, and I've always hoped that it would be improved. And I know Susan Horn, who's not here tonight, is also very much looking forward to that. So what a lot of wonderful projects you're looking at. That's amazing. Does anybody have any comments? Besides me?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing on the Measure A piece and thank the city for co-sponsoring another application, which MTD needs a city co-sponsor to do for that bike and pedestrian to replace the 2-position bike racks on the buses with 3-position bike racks, which has long been requested by the public. And so this would fund the replacement of those to increase bike capacity by 50%. So it was co-sponsored by cities of Goleta, Carpinteria, Santa Barbara, and the County of Santa Barbara. So that's in that same pot. So obviously, you know, we want all the cities to get funded and that one. But just wanted to thank Jessica and her team for pitching in on that one as well. And also sad that you could very well submit your Cycle 6 application and then days later find out that your Cycle 5 application for the same project was. So obviously, I hope you get the funding, but also huge bummer if you had to redo the whole application. And yeah, anyway, good luck.
I have one clarifying question. On the bike share program, Jessica, you said, I wasn't quite sure what the 68% was of people who have bought.
Oh, thank you for asking that. It's that one of the metrics that we're looking at for the pilot program is as how many riders are single riders versus monthly and annual member riders.
Okay.
So one of the metrics was, or in concern when we launched this program was, are we only going to get single riders? And the concern about that was that be competing with the local bike shops, et cetera. Or is it just, mainly local residents using for the intended use as the first and last mile connection for their commute? So initially when we first started the pilot, it started off with heavy single ridership, but it has transitioned more with 68.5% of it being member rides of monthly and annual permit holders.
Well, that's really good to hear, because I remember there was significant concern by the tourist bike shops that they would lose all their business, and it has not happened. I'm asking.
Yes.
Are they?
We'll have a report out on it, and I believe we touch on it in the council agenda report, and I believe we touched on it briefly for the last October meeting.
Yes,
but yeah, it's still being monitored, and it's not an exact apples to apples with what the local bike shops have for sort of their rental fleet versus e-bicycles. But the bike rental shops have not seen a major difference from this pilot program, and in fact, some of them have said that for those that have enjoyed riding the public bike share program, some people have decided, I want to invest in my own bicycle. And so, then they've gone to the local bike shops to, get a personal bicycle. Yes, for the local rental shops, it's not as well received. There's still concerns, but I don't think we have it completely quantified from their businesses. But some have alluded that yes, that some of their business has gone to some of the public bike share.
Well, thanks for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
I have one
yes.
question, if I may.
Sure.
Sort of unrelated, so I apologize. But just it got me thinking going over this. There's so many great projects to pursue and that have been identified. I'm just curious when it comes to the American Rescue Plan money that the city's received. Do you know of any discussion that's taken place about the possibility of using some of that for eligible projects?
Ooh.
Thank you, Committee Member Bakke, for the question, and through the chair. For that, that's another item that's going to City Council on Tuesday at this, the Finance Subcommittee level, and then the full council on March 10th. So as far as for projects or active transportation funding, that has not been in the discussion for these monies. Most of it is focusing on recovering other programs and budgets that have had a really big hit due to the pandemic. But I apologize, I don't have the specifics, but
thank you. That's helpful.
Council, the agenda report just got posted this afternoon.
That's why that prompted me to ask the question. I was thinking it was on my mind, and I appreciate that. I'd just make one kind of editorial comment that it seemed like there was a discretionary list of items that staff suggested, with a separate tranche beyond the revenue loss stuff that we could explore. So maybe something to think about at that meeting. But thank you.
If there isn't any other questions or comments, Ms. Mason, is there anybody from the public wishing to speak?
Yes, Ms. Grant, we have one person with their hand raised. I will go ahead and give Barry Remis the cue. You have 2 minutes and you may go ahead and speak, Mr. Remis.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Chair Rodriguez and TCC members. My name is Barry Remis, and I am representing SB Bike and Coast. And just want to let you know that we have also given support to the city in terms of the Measure A application for projects, as well as the reapplications for some of the Cycle 6 ATP. And while not officially, but unofficial support as well, as Ms. Blackerby mentioned, to the MTD's efforts to seek funding for the upgrades from 2 to 3 bike racks on the buses, which would certainly be a welcome enhancement. Also just following up on what Ms. Grant mentioned regarding next week's City Council meeting, it'll be great to be able to have you attend to listen to Bike Share update. And forgive me that I didn't mention this at general public comment, but the risk of a Brown Act violation. Also want to call you to the fact that that the City Council will hear a public hearing for a potential decision to declare the Chick-fil-A drive-through operation a public nuisance. We want to encourage you to attend and perhaps even either as committee members or not, or as individuals, express your support, as we will be, to City Council to move forward with that declaration, because as we think we've all seen, there is a daily risk to both pedestrian, cyclist, and also bus rider safety with the drive-through operation backing up queues onto State Street, as we've seen in the past. So just wanted to call your attention to that. A very important City Council meeting coming up next Tuesday, March 1st. And thank you very much. And we hope you will enjoy your evening. Take care.
Thanks, Barry. Nice to hear from you.
Madam Chair, at this time, there are no raised hands.
Well, wow. It's been a pretty information-packed hour and 45 minutes here, folks. Thank you so much for your excellent presentations. And I look forward to us hopefully meeting in person relatively soon. So I'm happy to adjourn the meeting unless someone has any other thing they want to add. All right. Thank you all for attending. Good night, Jessica.
All right.
Okay, good night,
All right.
committee members.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.